You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, it's so nice to be back with you all again. This is episode number 359 of Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. I want to start off the show by thanking all of you, our listeners, for tuning in your thousands. We've started 2023 really well with over 40,000 downloads in our first month. So thanks for continuing to listen. And this week we have another AT thru-hiker, though he is definitely a guy who goes his own way. Toby Busch, or Stovetop, lives out of his Ford Connect transit van. He's been YouTubing his lifestyle as Toby in Transit, but last year he moved out of his van and onto the Appalachian Trail. You know, this podcast gives me the opportunity to meet many different people who live such different lives. And I've been wondering about that. I couldn't do what Toby does, yet I'm full of admiration for his pure enjoyment of his life. And that's why I love bringing these people into your ears. Toby will be on in a moment. Then we get into the end of our Mighty Blue class of 2023. Yes, I know there are quite a few. But the way the class thinned out so early last year, well, I thought I needed a bit more stock this year in reserve, so to speak. This week we've got Sonny Blackwell joining the class. Sonny also has his own way of doing things, so I think you're going to get a kick out hearing what he's up to after Toby. Then the fabulous Dr. Lynn gives us all the lowdown on hydration. As always, Lynn's notes can be picked up through access to our Google Drive, the link for which is in the show notes. Plenty of you have already taken advantage of this, so I recommend that you download these short papers to keep yourself safe out on the trail. Finally, we'll have the second and concluding part of Chapter 13 of George Stefanos' Then the Hound Came, with George starting to understand what all the fuss was about Pennsylvania. So let's get started and meet Toby Busch, or Stovetop. Our guest today, I guess, is a kind of solitary guy in many ways. His name is Toby Busch, or Stovetop. Hey, Toby, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, I'm very good. And we've had a bit of problems trying to get connected here at the moment, but we were just now. But you're in a pretty nice place at the moment. You're in a park somewhere in Phoenix. And one of our listeners wrote to me asking me to connect with you and get your story. And when I read about you, when we spoke last week, you told me you'd been living out of your van, which is a Ford Transit Connect, for about 6 or 7 years. That's a long time to be living in quite a small space. Tell us how that came about.
I had been working at a year-round at a resort, and I had accrued up enough time where I could take about a month off every year. So I would take month-long trips to like Europe or wherever.
Sure.
And when I left that job, I got another job, and it was working in town. It was, it just kind of bummed me out, and I didn't get any vacation time. Pretty much I couldn't take, there was nobody who could do my job, so I couldn't take more than a week off at a time. And I couldn't take more than 2 weeks in a year. And I did that for a couple of years, and it just kind of wore me down. And I don't know where I latched on to the idea of moving into a van, but somewhere along the way I did. And I bought a van, built it out, and here I am.
Did you do it yourself?
Yeah, I did a really simple build myself. And then I had a professional put in my vent fan in my roof and also wire my electrical system.
And can you live in that year long, or do you just literally just follow the sun so you can work out your temperature depending upon where you are?
Yeah, the way I describe it is I'm constantly chasing 70 degrees
Nice.
Fahrenheit. I try to winter in warmer places and then summer in cooler places.
And what is that like for your social life, such as, you know, I'm not sure, we didn't really get into it much that much last time. So what is that like for your social life? Because, you know, if you're always moving around, you're never in one place at any one time. You can never hold down relationships for terribly long, I guess, with people. Or are you just quite comfortable being by yourself? Because now we are going to talk about your AT hike this year, last year rather. So do you find a lot of comfort being by yourself?
Yeah, I definitely enjoy my alone time. That being said, I am still a fairly social person.
Yeah. Yeah, you come across that way as well. I've got to say, looking at your videos, and I'll talk about those in a minute. So you say you're quite a social person. So what is it like, though, to be saying goodbye to friends and then moving on?
Well, the thing is that I worked at a seasonal resort for 20 years, 20-ish years, actually at the same resort for about 14. And so I know people all over the country who would, just come and work at the resort for a summer or a couple summers,
right.
And then leave. And so I literally have friends all over the country. So yeah, I just kind of work my travels into ways to visit, the friends that I already have. And
that's cool. That's cool.
I hiked with a friend on the AT, and I had other friends that lived in Great Barrington, and I stayed with them along the way. So yeah, that's kind of where I get my socialization, is just the friends that I've already established.
And you talked about the resort just now. That was in the Grand Teton National Park, and you lived there for 20 years from the age of 18. And you worked at night, didn't you?
I worked at two different resorts. Right. So the first one I worked for 6 years, and then the second one I worked for 14 years. Right. And yeah, the last 11 years, I was working as a night auditor in the summertime. So I would. It's kind of like a combination of front desk and accounting, but overnight. So 11 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Oh my gosh. I got to say, you've got a life beyond my understanding, and good for you, because you look very happy with it, looking at your videos, I tell you. And despite living pretty much outside most of the time, and as I say, you're calling from a park now, you've only recently become a hiker, haven't you? So what really got you into it in the first place?
Well, I've been a hiker for a long time, pretty much since I was a kid. Day hikes.
Yes, yeah.
And then I did do some weekend backpacking quite a bit in my 20s. But once I started that overnight job, weekend backpacking became quite difficult.
Sure.
Because I slept during the day. So it kind of made backpacking challenging. So I kind of quit backpacking for a long time. And then when I moved in the van, I started getting back into it. I started doing some weekend trips. And then, when I first built out the van, I actually started thinking, once I moved into the van, this really opens up my dream of hiking the AT, which I had had for a long time. Oh,
right. So I didn't get that from my notes the other day. So you've actually wanted to do this for some time.
Yeah, I've wanted to do the AT for a long time. And it was actually, I watched Craig M. Spielberg.
Right.
Yes. I watched him on trail that year. So I started building out my van in March, and that's when he started the trail, I think. And so I was following his journey. And when I moved into the van, I kept watching his videos to the end.
And that video that he does, is Craig McPherson, I believe, he did, I think it's the best video on the AT I've ever seen, the Appalachian Trail in 5 minutes. It is just so beautiful. It's got beautiful music to it, and he covers pretty much every part of the trail in just 5 minutes. And that was quite something, wasn't it?
Yeah, he is fantastic. In fact, he is a big part of the reason that I have a YouTube channel, because he filmed everything on his iPhone 6S.
Yes.
And when I had a flip phone for my first couple of years of van life, and when it died, I went and bought a iPhone SE, which has the camera of a 6S, and it just kind of thought about it. It's like, oh, I can make videos that are at least the same quality that he did.
Yeah.
And that really kind of informed the channel quite a bit. I really
I'm going to
liked
actually come back to the channel and how you do the videos. So I thought it was interesting the other day when we talked about it. But before we get onto that, you said that your longest trip prior to 2020 was 4 days, and you tried to do the PCT. So why did you try to do the PCT and not the AT originally? So
yeah, I had planned on doing the AT in the summer of 2017, and that fell through, and then in 2018, and that fell through. And then I was roughly planning on it again for 2020, and a couple of friends of mine were going to be hiking the PCT, like a couple of good friends who worked at that same lodge with me in the Tetons.
Sure.
And I just decided it was kind of stupid to travel across the country to hike the AT when like two of my best friends are hiking the PCT. So I switched gears to the PCT, got my permit about eight days before their permit because I couldn't get the same dates. And of course, 2 days after I got on trail is when the whole pandemic thing happened.
And did the PCT Association react the same way as the Appalachian Trail Conservancy did? Do they advise people to get off straight away?
I think it was right around the 20th. It was right around March 20th. I think it was, I don't remember if it was before or after the AT.
Right.
But yeah, they were asking people to get off trail. So that happened about 2 days after I got on.
And you started on March the 18th, 2 days before that. And, you know, at that time, when you started, we all knew there was something going on, didn't we? Although perhaps not as much as we should have. Did you consider postponing at that stage, or did you just thought, well, I'm probably safer out there than I am at home?
Well, that was definitely part of my thinking. But things were definitely hitting the fan, so to speak.
Yes.
And yeah, I think my thinking on it at the time was the PCTA is still helping people get on trail. They were helping international people start early.
Oh, really? Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So I just decided to go for it, but it was definitely like going through the airport was like a ghost town, the Salt Lake City airport. Yeah. It was, San Diego. I flew into San Diego and it was all like locked down and it was pretty crazy. It was
strange
pretty
time. Strange
surrealistic.
Times. Yeah, strange times. And so you got on there, started March the 18th, and you didn't get off straight away, did you? So how much did you actually do on the trail?
I did 150 miles.
Right.
So I ended up being on trail about 16 days. I had to wait in Warner Springs for a few days for a package. So yeah, I ended up doing 150 miles to Paradise Valley Cafe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I loved it. It was really hard to get off trail, but.
So what was it about that? What was it about, you know, you've lived this and I promise you, I probably sound like I'm being aggressively attacking your lifestyle. I'm not at all. I'm slightly envious in many ways. What was it about that lifestyle? Because you've lived this relatively nomadic lifestyle. What did it give you being out on the PCTs that made you really think this is something I could do?
I really love walking. I love the act of walking. It's like almost meditative for me. I love walking. I love hiking. I love being in nature. So, I mean, it just clicked with me and I knew it would. Like it's not one of those things where like some people aren't sure how it's going to, I knew I was going to love through hiking.
That's cool. That must be a lovely thing to have that feeling realized as well. And you got off the trail though after 150 miles, but later that summer you did come back, didn't you? How much did you do later in the year?
So I went up to Washington and I did 125 miles from Rainy Pass down to Stevens Pass. Right.
And that was just as good? You were really up for that?
It was bad. Like I was out of shape by that point. I had actually fattened up quite a bit already. So I had to hike it slower. I think I did it's a stretch with no resupply. So it's 125 miles with no resupply. Pretty much.
Wow. That's something.
Yeah.
You never get that on the AT.
Something.
You never get that on the AT.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't get that on the AT for sure.
Yeah, which is nice.
But it was, so I did it over, I think the course of, I did 125 miles in 12 days and carrying 12 days worth of food.
Wow.
Like that was a horrible mistake. If I was to do it again, I would definitely try to be in better shape.
Yes.
And do it in eight or less.
Yeah. Yeah. And then having done that, you then obviously came across the country and you actually got on the AT in November of all times. So what was the thought behind that? Because I presume by then you were thinking, I'm definitely going to do the AT then.
Yeah. I mean, I think if I had any doubts about hiking the AT after I did that section hike, I was like fully in because it is different than the PCT. It's not as spectacular and I still loved every minute of it.
Sure.
And it was, I really enjoyed it. I started October 31st and it was right around the time of the 2020 elections here in the U.S.
Right. Good time to get
And
away.
so
yeah.
I just I deleted my news app and just didn't even, it's like, I don't want to know what's happening. And of course it ended up being this gigantic thing to do. But I just had my phone off and hiked the trail, and it was awesome. So
I'm sure it was. Yeah, I'm sure it was.
To Dick's Creek Gap.
Yeah, quite right too. And obviously you're on today to tell us about your AT through hike last year. What actually got you to the AT? Because when we spoke before, you said you had something of an epiphany. So what happened?
It was in January, I think, is when I first started like seriously considering hiking the AT. I was 238 pounds at the time, which is the heaviest I've ever been in my entire life.
Sure.
Damn you, pandemic. And I just had this sudden thing. It's like, hey, I have the money right now. Why don't I hike the AT this summer?
So doing your lifestyle, do you work? You pitch up places you live, and then you get jobs locally, or do you have a specific set of skills you can transfer from one place to another anyway?
I try to find like seasonal gigs. There's a lot of stuff that are geared towards RV people and van life people.
Oh, right.
So the one I did before to get my money for the trail, I did the sugar beet harvest in North Dakota.
Jeez. You did talk about having a bad back before. That's probably why, wasn't it?
No, so the sugar beet harvest is not what you think it is.
Oh, right,
It's all automated in the fact that you're working at the sugar company and you're directing trucks where to dump their beets.
Oh, right.
So these big dump trucks.
I had visions of you wading through the fields with a machete.
No, definitely not that. So pretty much just waving trucks onto a little pad to dump their sugar beets.
All right. So you were doing the work and you saved money for certain things, which is totally understandable. But as you know, the Appalachian Trail, and I'm sure the PCT, it's not a cheap gig, is it? And given those living circumstances, did you have to be quite careful on the trail, or did you sort of spend too much on the trail? Because most people tend to.
I definitely was careful, and I still spent way too much. Like we talked about earlier, I just had no self-control when I got to a town or a restaurant or a gas station or anything. I just had no self-control, and I did a really good job with my budget as far as like buying resupplies. But yeah, all bets were off when I was near a restaurant.
Well, you already mentioned your weight, and I'm going to jump ahead to one of the questions I was thinking about, because I saw a couple of your videos on your YouTube channel this morning, and I was particularly drawn to the weight loss one. You lost about 45 pounds on the AT, and I know what it's like. You go into town, you see burgers and stuff like that and beers, and you really want to pig everything down. How did you think about how you're going to intake enough calories and nutrition to keep your strength up for the hike?
I didn't do any sort of like dire planning. I just figured my body would tell me how much to eat, which it pretty much did. It
told you to eat all the time then.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that happens. Yeah, that's the way it goes. And your preparations for the trail, did you said you hiked where you liked. Was the gear you had for your day hikes and so on, was that adequate for your trip, or did you have to buy new stuff generally?
So I bought new gear for the PCT.
Oh, right.
And then after that, I ended up switching some out. Yeah, I ended up carrying a different backpack, and I had the same tent. I ended up carrying a different sleeping pad. Yeah, so I had some things I definitely bought specifically for the AT.
And you started in April, didn't you? So you'd miss a lot of the cold weather, or was it because it was a very hot year last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, I started April 12th, and I only had 1 day below freezing. It was on Tray Mountain in Georgia.
It always is on Tray Mountain. It's absolutely freezing. I've had two AT hikes, and both of them is freezing on Tray Mountain. It's horrendous there, isn't it?
Yeah, it was pretty cold that night. But I had enough to stay more or less warm.
Yeah.
And so I just had that one night below freezing, and then one night near the end there was some frost on the ground, so it must have got right to freezing. But that was pretty much it. I didn't have too much of a problem with the cold.
Pretty cool.
The heat, on the other hand,
wow, yeah,
the heat was unbearable through New York, especially.
Yeah, I'm sure. We've heard lots of stories this year. A lot of people got off the trail because of it as well. But before we actually get to New York, I want to talk about how you actually got to Amicalola. You told me a mode of transportation. I'm sure other people have used it as well. But you went by the swankiest way to get to Amicalola Falls, didn't you?
Yep, I took an Uber. So I did have to take an overnight bus, which is not swanky at all.
Not at all. No.
From Mobile, Alabama to Atlanta. Greyhound, and then from there I took an Uber to the trail, which actually ended up being cheaper than the shuttle would have been. I'm sure
it's not a bad idea actually, because Ubers are so ubiquitous actually these days. So a pretty good thing to have. And the fact you've been on the trail the previous year or year before actually, did you feel prepared for those early days because you knew what Georgia was like? How did you find Georgia?
Yeah, I was fairly well prepared. I will say I made a couple of bad campsite selections. So I woke up in a puddle of water,
nice.
Sort of thing, during the rainstorm. Yeah,
that's called education. You learn stuff, don't you?
That's called it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I learned some important lessons there. But yeah, I had a good time through Georgia. I had done that section before, so I had an idea of what it was going to be. What the hard parts were going to be. And it was a nice little starter. And
I was looking through my notes the other day. You actually took a stove on the PCT, but you decided to cold soak on the AT. And so you're a good person to tell us the differences that you noticed between the two approaches. It must have sped you up in the morning for a start. In fact, if you ever did another long distance trail, which would you prefer, to go cold soak or to use a stove?
I would probably do a combination in the future. What I would probably do, they make those little BRS stoves, that little Chinese stove that you can buy on Amazon. It's like $16. Mm-hmm. It weighs less than an ounce.
Sure.
And it just screws onto the top of a bottle. So if you just bring that and a little pot, everything I cold soaks pretty fast. Like it all pretty much soaks within 10 minutes.
Oh, really?
5 to 10 minutes.
Right.
So you don't really need a food jar.
Right.
With a lid. Like you can get away with just doing that. And for a couple things, like if you want to do like the Nor rice sides, those take a couple hours. But I didn't do those that often.
So what would you eat then? Tell me what do you eat that you can cold soak in 10 minutes?
Couscous cold soak in about 10 minutes. Stovetop stuffing.
Which is why you're called Stovetop, apparently.
Which is why I'm called Stovetop.
By the way, I've never heard of Stovetop stuffing, so I obviously haven't lived. So tell us what Stovetop stuffing is.
It's a very American thing. It's a very American thing, yes. So Stovetop stuffing, instant mashed potatoes, of course.
Oh, that must be horrible cold. Oh,
they're fine. Yeah. I mean, yeah, they're fine. I mean, everybody has, and you can do ramen noodles cold. You can do the Nor rice sides cold.
Right.
For breakfast, you can do oatmeal cold.
None of this is sounding attractive to me at all. And I just wonder what the difference is in terms of what it saves you in terms of time and weight, I suppose.
It does save you in a few things. It saves you in money for fuel. It saves you in weight, especially for the fuel.
Yeah, sure.
And then, it just makes everything faster and easier. And, when you're, the more simple things are on trail, I find when I'm long distance hiking, the better. Like,
100%.
Just the more enjoyable my life is. And in the end, like trail food is pretty much just fuel. And you say instant mashed potatoes sound horrible cold. Instant mashed potatoes are horrible hot.
No, they're not. They're great.
It's really just fuel to get you into town where you can eat real food. It's like
I can buy into that as a concept. I can buy into that as a concept. I can see that. That's fair enough. Then that's fair enough. And as I say, I went through some of your videos, and I've often told people about the importance of keeping a record of your trail and so on. And you've been recording your van life anyway. So I guess the process of what you're doing is almost automatic for you. Tell the listeners exactly what you use and how you keep up with it all, because it's quite a thing to keep posting, isn't it?
Definitely. So I video edit and upload all from my phone. I have an iPhone 8 Plus currently.
Right.
And so I just do it all from my phone. So sometimes I would do it when I was in town, but sometimes I would edit on trail. I would wake up in the morning and get some editing done just in my tent.
Wow. I mean, that's probably what Hawk does. Hawk has a video every single day. I don't know how he does it, to be honest with you. But you were getting these things. So you can edit using, and what software do you use?
I just use iMovie. So,
right. And how much can you edit with iMovie on a phone?
I don't do super complicated editing. I just keep it pretty straightforward, pretty simple. I do some transitions, some fades and wipes and slides, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. They come out really well. But getting back to the hike itself, we all increase our pace as we go. You started quite nice and easy with 8s and 9s, but you said by the Smokies you're doing 15s. Were you always comfortable with those mileages? Did you strengthen and lose weight pretty quickly?
Yeah. I mean, I was actually almost holding myself back at a certain point to not go too hard, too fast.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I felt pretty good with it. I think I did my first 20 miler right around day 30. So about 1 month in, I did my first 20 miler. And
you started April, finished September. So you did it in about 5.5 months, which is about the same amount of time that I went myself as well. And we talked about, when we were speaking the other day, about your highlights of the trip. And like me, you loved the Roan Highlands, didn't you? Talk us about the Roan Highlands, one of my favourite spots.
It totally caught me off guard. It was so beautiful. It was, Hump Mountain, Little Hump.
Yeah.
It really feels totally different than the other southern sections of the AT. It's like almost like you're in another country, like Scotland or Ireland or something.
Yeah.
So just like these open grassy meadows, and beautiful. Really liked it.
Yeah, the balls are fantastic. Then, of course, there was New Hampshire and Maine. But you told me also that you thought Maine was your favourite state. What? By then, of course, you're ready for everything. You're going really well. Did you have some tough river crossings, though?
Yeah, I definitely had a couple of sketchy river crossings. I would like to note that everybody talks about how hard Maine is, and I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that's mostly the first 20 miles of Maine. that section,
yes.
That section through Mahoosic Notch and up to Grafton Notch, where you get to the road.
Yeah.
That's the really hard section of Maine, and then after that, it's really not that bad, especially compared to New Hampshire. It was beautiful. Yeah, Maine is gorgeous. I love you get up to those rocky balds, and then like looking down on all the lakes. Pine trees. Yeah, Maine is beautiful.
And seeing no houses around the lakes is a joy as well, isn't it? I mean,
it is wilderness. It is wilderness.
It truly is.
It might be the first time on the AT that you're really in true wilderness.
Yes, I think you're right. Yeah. And by the way, when I was watching through your films, there was one which showed was that a grizzly bear? A bear encounter when a bear walked right up behind you while you were playing guitar, completely oblivious.
Yeah, a grizzly bear. Yeah,
it was.
I was facing my van. Like I am right now in my camp chair, and I had my headphones in. I had a guitar and was putzing around, and a grizzly bear, walked directly behind me, like within 4 feet.
Oh my gosh!
It could have came up and smelled me for all I know. Like it could have just like came up and gave a whiff. I don't know, but it crossed behind me, and then once it got past me, like it caught my peripheral vision, and I pretty much silently screamed to myself at that point.
I could hear you breathing. I can tell you. I was watching. I was laughing because you could hear you breathe, and you were obviously trying to be as quiet as you possibly could be. Because you, having the bear walk past you then decide to be as quiet as possible, don't you?
Yeah, and I grabbed my camera to film it, and when I brought it up in the motion, the bear like looked back at me, looked back at me. It's like keep going, and he did. So I just filmed him walking away.
And I also listened to your summing up and you were actually still in Millinocket 2 days after summiting. I suppose, that because you're mobile, you're a mobile person, you can stay wherever you like. Most people tend to get in and out of Millinocket at the end straight away. And you talked about the pure joy on the top of Katahdin, but said your emotions you had were leading up to that day. Can you expand upon that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really know what to feel the whole day. Like the whole way leading up, I was just a little bit numb, not really sure how I should feel and how I was processing it. And because there's just so much.
Yes.
Like you spent all of this time, all of this effort, you've been hiking with these people, you've been doing this one thing with this one goal for, at that point, almost seems like you've been doing it your whole life at that point.
Yes.
By the time you get up there. So much going through.
And when you're halfway through, it feels like you're going to be doing it your whole life, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
So the emotions, then you start and I think, that's quite a good way of putting it, because I didn't think about that before. So, because I've had this recently, quite a few people, when they got to Katahdin, they almost didn't know what to think. It's probably because there are so many different emotions running through. You're able to, in the 100-mile wilderness leading up to it, you're able to think about those emotions more clearly, aren't you, when you're walking towards Katahdin?
Yeah, I think so. But as you're heading up, like, it's just all hitting you. Like every emotion on the planet is hitting you on that walk up.
Yeah.
But when I got to the summit, like all of that was gone, and I was just ecstatic.
Yeah, it's a joyful moment, no question. And we started out by me talking about your singular life. Yet you were at pains to tell me then, and you have tonight today, do you like people? Did the AT make you want other things, or maybe more of a life with more people around you? Or are you quite happy with continuing the life of living in a van?
I'm pretty happy with the van life. I will say I want to work in some long trails here and there.
Right.
Maybe not the 2,000 milers,
Right.
At least not right away.
Right, sure.
But I would love to do the Colorado Trail. I would love to do the whole Washington section of the PCT. So I have things in my mind for future hikes.
And what about working? Are you working now?
I am. I'm working here in Phoenix for a big, terrible company.
Don't say things like that, because you might not be working there much longer. Well, look, I think you've got an interesting take on life, and I admire you at the doing your thing and doing what you want to do when you want to do it. So that's wonderful. So I appreciate you coming on the show and telling your story. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Okay, buddy. Take it easy, okay?
Yep, you too.
Bye.
Bye.
I truly had no idea what stovetop stuffing was. He's definitely an individualist, isn't he? He does his own thing. You should check out his YouTube channel, especially the grizzly that he films that had walked right past him. And you'll notice that he has a signature thumbs up in pretty much all of his pictures. Thanks to those of you who've checked out our HRN Trading Post store. I haven't been able to add any new designs to the store, but it's getting near the top of my list, so please check it out if you haven't. Now, let's meet Sonny Blackwell, our newest member of the Mighty Blue class of 2023. Here's Sonny. So today's guest, another member of the class, Mighty Blue class of 2023, is Sonny Blackwell. Hey, Sonny, how are you?
Hello, Steve. Good to be with you today.
And good to be with you too. And since when have you been Sonny? Was that your? I assume that wasn't your original name, was it?
See, I've been Sonny since before I can remember. It's not my legal name. Only attorneys and bill collectors called me by my real name, but everybody all my life has called me Sonny, so I've just learned to roll with it.
Sonny works. So this trip, this Appalachian Trail dream of yours, like it's a dream of so many people, and certainly, you're a generation, you're slightly younger than me. Well, you're quite a bit younger than me, I suspect, but you're certainly younger than me. How long have you been wanting to do this particular trip, and why do you want to do it?
The desire to do this, Steve, started in 1984. Just out of college,
Wow.
I worked for a state agency in Tennessee. And we were sometimes called in to assist the National Park Service, National Forest Service on search and rescue missions. So I had an opportunity to go through the National Park Service's Wilderness Search and Rescue class. And a lot of that was based on searches that had gone wrong, searches that had done well. And they loaded us up and took us up to Spence Field, which is, right on the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah.
Because that was the site of a 1969 search there was a case study in how not to do a search and rescue. So there I encountered my first AT thru-hikers, and ever since then I've wanted to do that. And then, of course, life gets in the way and priorities change. And a few years ago, I ended up like so many other people and went down the YouTube rabbit hole, and that kind of rekindled the fire. And here I am now. I'm planning an AT trip in 2023.
Well, you're not only planning an AT trip, you've actually started already, haven't you?
I've actually done a week on trail, yes.
So tell us why you did it that way, and tell us when you started.
Go back a little bit. I asked my employer for a leave of absence, and I didn't qualify for one of those. So I ran the numbers and handed in my retirement papers a couple of years early. And my last day at work was November the 30th, and my first day on trail was December 3rd, because I was just so anxious to go out and do a shakedown and gain confidence in my gear. So I went on December 3rd. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend other people do that, because there are some problems with that time frame, as I come to find out. But I did a week and made it from Springer all the way to Hiawassee. So I got right at 70 miles, had a really great shakedown, learned a lot, came back. So now I'm making a few tweaks and plan to go back around the 1st of March.
So why was December the 3rd not a great day?
Darkness. As you approach the winter solstice, the nights get really long. So
you've got some short days then, haven't you? Really,
some short days, and you have to hustle. And I was not in trail shape, so that plus the weather. My wife dropped me off at the Springer Mountain Trailhead, and literally, I'm not exaggerating. 200 yards into the hike up Springer to go to the terminus, it started raining, and it did not stop raining for 6 days. So I've never seen, I've been up there quite a bit, and I was ready for some foggy conditions, but I've never seen it that foggy for that long. So it was 6 days really in fog, rain, mist, and by the time that 6 days was over, I was about ready to come off. To go any further, my original plan was to go to Winding Stair and get in 100 miles.
Right.
But in addition to darkness, that's Christmas season. So a lot of the hostels and a lot of the shuttle drivers, they're taking off for Christmas. So there's not a lot of support there that time of year. So I found myself alone on trail. And one day I was hiking along, and I saw a fella coming back in the other direction, southbound. He had hiked from Maine. He was in a great mood. But he shared with me, hey, I'm the last one. So that told me had I continued any further, I would have been out on trail largely by myself with very few people to call. And I just made a risk management decision to come off a little bit early, pull the pin at Hiawassee, because the trail will be there and I can go back.
Sure. So what was it like? You probably were a heck of a lot by yourself anyway. So how did you cope with that, the loneliness, especially if Georgia's not an easy place to start anyway. To get it in rain must have been really tough. And that must have hit you mentally, I presume, didn't it?
A little bit, but not really that bad. I'm somewhat of an introvert anyway. So the loneliness didn't really bother me that much. It was just knowing that had I slipped down and hit my head or broken my leg or some emergency occurred with that few people out there, it would have been a long time before somebody found me. And I do carry a GPS locator, but help would have been a long time getting to me.
Right. So what is your hiking experience? What have you brought to the trail in terms of experience of being on trails and going overnight and so on?
Recently, not a lot. I grew up in the woods hunting, I was a wild kid. So spent a lot of time in the woods, Boy Scouts. Of course, when I worked for the state of Tennessee, we spent a lot of time outdoors, but really for the last 38 years, not a lot. So I'm really having to dust off some skills long since forgotten.
Yes, I'm sure you are, but also some physical skills because, we always say, you can get the physicality by doing it, but you've actually done it. And if you stopped work on was it November the 30th and started on the 3rd December, you probably didn't have much time to get physically in shape, did you? Or did you just kind of just go to the top of spring and see how it went?
Well, a little better than that. I live in a very rural area, and we have some old roads that are cut through properties, my property, adjacent properties, and I have a 7-mile loop. And I've been hiking. I had hiked for 7 miles every day under pack weight for a good 6 weeks to get in shape.
Oh,
But
wow.
I live in central Mississippi, and we don't have very many hills here as compared to North Georgia.
Yeah. Those hills are a bit of a shock, aren't they? When you first hit them.
They will get your attention, most definitely, yes. In fact, I've been acquiring gear for the last 2 years, looking at websites and YouTube videos and talking to people who've hiked the trail. And, the equipment that we used back in the mid-'80s in search and rescue teams, that's obsolete old stuff now.
Yeah. Your skill set isn't obsolete, is it? So you knew how to do certain stuff having been out there anyway. Did you find that was helpful to you on the trail?
I found it very helpful, but it's very rusty. So a lot of those skills I'm having to sharpen again. Once you're out there on trail, they come back to you, but you have to be in the middle of it for the skills to really come back.
Yeah, I'm sure. And you say your wife took you to the trail, so I presume she's supporting this. What does she think about you going out on the trail, especially going in December as well?
She thinks I'm crazy, like a lot of people do, but she's come to accept it.
Nothing wrong with that.
But she's supportive.
So is she resupplying for you, or is she, are you going to town to resupply in that period of time, that week?
I'll go to town most of the time. She will send me a couple of boxes. I anticipate a box at Fontana to get ready for the Smokies, and maybe another couple of boxes along the way. But for the most part, I'll be resupplying in town.
Yeah, I the more I've thought about this, and having done it twice, I definitely feel it was better to resupply on the trail because otherwise you end up with too much food. Frankly, that's what I certainly did. And when you were out there this year, last year now, when you were out there last year, did you cook or did you cold soak?
I cook one meal a day. I like to have a hot meal at night. The rest of the day, it's breakfast bars and honey buns and things that don't require cooking. When you're hiking that time of year with that short of daylight hours, I really didn't want to spend a lot of time cooking. I wanted to spend my time hiking.
Sure. And how quickly did it get dark then in the afternoon?
When I was on trail, it was getting dark by 5 o'clock. By 5:15 or 5:20, it was dark. And with that much cloud cover, there was no starshine, moonshine, anything like that. So it was dark until 6:15 or 6:30 the next morning.
Wow, that makes for a long evening, doesn't it? What did you do in the evenings? Did you just try to get to sleep or did you just hang out and read? I mean, what was your evening like, especially as you were by yourself most of the time?
I tried to listen to podcasts, and I took a very small portable radio along with me. I won't be taking that back again because reception is really not good up in the mountains. But I only sleep 4 or 5 hours a night anyway. So I basically just laid there and tried to listen to podcasts and wait for daylight.
Wow. Oh, gosh. Were you bored or was this the adventure you were looking for?
It was a test. It was a shakedown. I can't say that I was bored, but I really am looking forward to going back and being around more people to have conversation with.
I'm sure you are. I think it's a great idea to get a head start, but I think, you miss, I suppose, to me, the fundamental aspect of being on a trail, which is be with other people. And I wouldn't like that personally myself at all. And you're the second person of this group that's done some miles already. I don't envy either of you having done that, to be honest with you. But you're going to get back on the 1st of March and you will meet people obviously straight away and it'd be great. You're going to really enjoy that part of it. You've got the whole hike to look forward to still, or quite a lot of the hike to look forward to still. What are you most looking forward to when you're out there?
I knew that question was coming and I gave it a lot of thought. What I'm looking forward to most, besides the hiking community, is the fact that I can have a honey bun every single day and not feel guilty about it.
You know the worst part. Yeah, you know what the worst part of that is though, Sonny, is that when you get back home, you're going to continue to want them, and you'll probably continue to eat them, and you'll be piling all that weight you lost straight back on.
Well, don't tell me that. I'll just enjoy the moment while I can. I've been really good about laying off the honey buns for years, but now I get to eat a honey bun every day.
I seem to remember they're about 800 calories. They're just ridiculous amount of calories in there.
They're loaded with calories.
Really
They're also loaded with fat, which I understand is really good when you're hiking.
Yeah, you can eat senselessly. It's not a problem at all. And you need to do it because this is the one time in your life you can do it. So if that's what you're most looking forward to, and that's an unusual answer from most people, honey bun is not what most of them are looking forward to. What are you least looking forward to when you go back there?
Well, I really didn't like the extended dark hours, but that shouldn't be as much of a problem as I go back later in the year and we approach summer solstice.
Sure.
I'll have a lot more daylight. So that problem should resolve itself. But I'm a former EMT. I spent 26 years on a volunteer fire rescue squad, and I've treated hypothermia cases before, and I know how scary that can be. And that's why I was so interested in Dr. Lim's presentation not long ago on your show. But being cold and wet at the same time, I'm not looking forward to that. Cold really doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
Wet doesn't bother me at all, but cold and wet bothers me. I'm not looking forward to that. And I know it's going to happen.
And it is a terrible combination. But, you know, I tell you what's great about that. You get out of those clothes, those wet clothes, and you just get into your sleeping bag and you start warming up. And that feeling of warming up is just so wonderful. So, you know, you're aware of it. You're obviously more aware of it than I am. But having been out there and being cold and wet at the same time, it is a wonderful thing that you're able to just resolve that as soon as you get into your sleeping bag and start getting this feeling the warmth go through you. And your name, Sonny, is a sort of trail name or a nickname. Have you settled on a trail name yet, or are you still waiting to be named?
You know, part of this hike is for me to get out of my professional life, and I really want the trail to name me. When I left my company, I asked people that know me well and have worked with me what I was good at. It's kind of a poor man's 360-degree feedback exercise. So as part of me finding myself again, my authentic self again out on the trail, I'd really like for the trail to name me. And of course, I don't have to take it if I don't like the name. I have a name in reserve. So if I don't have a trail name within 2 or 3 weeks, I'll go back to the name that I'm thinking of.
Are you going to share that with us, or should we wait and see what happens?
Let's wait and see what happens on that. I don't want to tip my hat.
Okay, man. Well, look, I'm mightily impressed that both you and Chuck have already got some miles under your belt for the Mighty Blue Class of 23 anyway. And, you know, you'll probably feel that benefit when you get back on the trail in March. What I'd like to do is catch up with you again before you go at least one more time so we can see how your preparations are coming on, because I'm sure there will be changes from what you had when you started in December to what you're going to start with in March. So let's stay in touch. I wish you well, obviously, and we'll speak soon, okay?
Thanks, Steve. Good talking to you.
And you, mate. Take it easy. Bye.
Cheers.
Do you know, getting some of those early miles under your belt before Christmas makes a lot of sense. It kind of gives you a shakedown, doesn't it? So you can see how your gear works and how it doesn't. And it also tells you if you're going to like this thing that we call a thru-hike. This is not for everybody. And if you could be honest with yourself, you could well save yourself a whole lot of pain and suffering the following year by finding out that a thru-hike isn't for you. For me, I well remember standing in a shop in Dahlonega in 2014, the day before I set out. And I was browsing through somebody's AT book. I can't remember which one it was. The introduction said something along the lines of, it's got to be the thing that you want to do more than anything else this summer. And I thought to myself, yeah, it is. After that, I never doubted it was what I wanted to do. Now let's catch up with our very own doctor, Dr. Lynn Savino. Here she is. Well, we're back on with Dr. Lynn again. This week, we're going to be talking about hydration. Well, first, Lynn, how are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm back home in Connecticut after a great week seeing my dad.
And you're trying out a new microphone, so we'll see how that works, shall we?
Yes.
Now, hydration. And it's something I learned when I was away, how desperately important it was. And one of the things I learned was, you know, by the time you realise you're thirsty, you're probably on the way to being dehydrated. So tell us the importance of and why it's important to be so well hydrated.
We all need water for our cells to continue their metabolism. Mm-hmm. We need water for our blood to help circulate. If you can't circulate your blood, you're not going to be able to get good nutrition and oxygen to the muscles, including the heart muscle, and all the way down to your little toes in your feet, which are carrying you those 2,200 miles. So it's really important to be able to have good circulation, and hydration is part of that.
Right. And funny enough, I think the way in which I tried to drink when I was on the trail, and certainly when I wrote about it, I said, drink like you're a condemned man, eat and drink like you're a condemned man, and it's difficult to know how much to drink, isn't it? Because I try glugging down lots of water, but sometimes can you drink too much?
You absolutely can drink too much. You can be actually overhydrated, where you have more free water in your body than is good for you, because that dilutes out the electrolytes that you have. The electrolytes, the most important electrolytes that for hiking are the sodium and potassium. We have a lot of other electrolytes in our body, but importantly for sodium and potassium, because that helps for muscle function and cellular function. And if you drink too much water, you can actually dilute out the number of electrolytes you have, and it will feel in your body like you're not actually having enough sodium and potassium.
Oh dear. So, and that actually cuts to another thing, because I would drink often just water and without electrolytes. Sometimes I know that when I went on my trip to climb Whitney last year, that one of the friends of the show, he sent me an electrolyte regimen. So talk to us about electrolytes, and in terms of how often you should include electrolytes, or should it be every single time you drink water?
You don't necessarily have to put electrolytes in your water every time you drink. If you do, there's nothing wrong with that. But it may be inconvenient. So I recommend people drink an electrolyte solution or add an electrolyte tablet to pretty much like every other liter that they're going to be drinking. If you have a smart water bottle, or if you have an Nalgene bottle, those are usually about 1 liter.
Sure.
Every other liter that you're going to be drinking, you should probably do that. Another way of doing that is if you're resupplying and you're buying Gatorade, drink half the Gatorade and then fill that Gatorade bottle with plain water. And then you're having half Gatorade, half water. And that's actually a very easy way of getting a lot of good electrolytes.
And when I looked at the Gatorade, particularly in one, so I'm probably going to be wrong here, but from my memory, it was something like 30 grams of sugar or something, some huge amount of sugar in there. Is the sugar in addition to the electrolytes, or is that part of the whole thing?
You don't necessarily have to have sugar to maintain good electrolytes. The sugar is important for nutrition and energy. But as far as electrolytes are concerned, you can take an electrolyte powder or an electrolyte tablet that doesn't have any sugar in it. They sell Gatorade Zero, I think, something like that, that has no sugar in it. For hikers, it's important to have sugar as part of your nutrition, but not necessarily part of your hydration.
All right. So it fulfills another function. It doesn't fulfill a hydration function.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. And one of the things in your notes that we're going to actually add to the Google Drive, which lots of people are now getting access to, which is kind of nice actually. You say there's no real need to pre-hydrate, but it's a good thing to hydrate at the end of the day. And I understand the concept of hydrating at the end of the day, but that makes me sound that and it may very well be that I'm wrong. I've always thought that when I was hiking, I would stop at a stream, I would drink, say, a litre of water, then I would fill up again and just carry 1 litre of water, because I was effectively then carrying 2 litres of water, one inside me and 1 in my Nalgene. So that was pre-hydrating. Was I doing that wrong?
No, and what you were doing wasn't necessarily pre-hydrating. You were rehydrating. When I talk about pre-hydrating, I think I'm talking more about people who are going out for a day hike or maybe a weekend where they tank up before they leave the house or before they leave their hotel room or something like that. You're well hydrated at that point, so you don't necessarily need to add more to that. But what is better for you is if you continue to hydrate often on the trail. Some people like to carry a water bladder, which is very good because you can sip water through the straw throughout the day. And that's very helpful for the body to be able to utilize that water very efficiently. When people who carry Nalgene bottles or smart water bottles and they don't sip throughout the day, they stop for a break. It's not necessarily a bad thing to camel up, as we would like to say,
nice
drink that water 1 liter because your body is now, as you said, is carrying it. Sometimes the body doesn't utilize all that water as efficiently as if you're doing sip after sip after sip.
Right.
So if somebody is interested in just determining what would be the best hydration system for them, and they don't know whether or not they should carry a Nalgene bottle or a smart water bottle or a water bladder, I would, as a physician, recommend you try the water bladder as opposed to the Nalgene bottle. It doesn't work for everybody, and as long as you stay well hydrated, either way is perfectly fine.
So how do you know if you're actually drinking enough? Because I'm going to tell a little story at the end of this, but how do you know when you're actually drinking enough?
A good rule of thumb is to drink about 1 to 2 cups of water per hour that you're actually moving. A cup is about 8 ounces. For hikers, it's easy to measure that because we all have markers on our Nalgene bottles or our water bladders, how many liters we have. And so it's very easy for you to actually objectively see how much you're actually drinking.
Yeah.
So if you've been hiking about 4 hours and you stop for lunch, you should probably be drinking about 1 liter of water at some point during the lunchtime. Same thing when you stop for dinner. You might need more in hot or humid weather, maybe a little less. Important to make sure that you drink even when it's cold out. You might not feel thirsty, but you're still going to be dehydrated with all the work you're doing.
Yeah.
So the other way to monitor is to check the color of your urine.
Yep.
If the urine that you see is clear or light yellow, it means that you're well hydrated. If you see very dark yellow urine, then you probably need to drink more. And the third way is to monitor your symptoms. If you find that you're developing a headache or muscle cramps, or what we call the umbles, stumble, mumble, grumble, or fumble, that's a sign that you could be either dehydrated or overhydrated. In other words, too much free water, as we talked about earlier, and you need to get some electrolytes in your system.
Well, I was going to say it was something that happened to me and something that made me realise the importance of water and regulating it and working out exactly what it should be. When I was my 2014 hike, I hiked for all day and I drank 9 litres of water that day because I was checking how much water I was drinking. I remember thinking, crikey, I've had lots of 9 litres of water. I didn't pee for 24 hours. And I don't know, no idea why. It's never happened since or anything like that. But when I did pee, it wasn't a great look, and then tons suddenly came out as well. So that was kind of weird. But I realised that something was happening to me. And I wasn't realising I was thirsty. But it's nothing to do with thirst, is it? It's all about the necessity of actually hydrating as opposed to slaking your thirst, isn't it?
Yes. We do have a thirst mechanism. That's a reflex that helps the human body to know when to start drinking, but it's not always the best way to determine whether or not you're properly hydrated.
Right. And what would your symptoms be if you were overhydrated? What would you feel? I mean, how can you recognize whether you're overhydrated or not?
It's very similar to being dehydrated, because you have...
Well, that's sort of not helpful, is it? If this is the same,
yeah.
If you say you've got to know which one it is.
So the way you can maybe determine whether or not you're dehydrated or overhydrated is to determine how much water did you actually drink, and did you take any electrolytes in during the daytime while you were drinking all that water.
Okay. And I know that obviously you're a hiker and I'm a hiker, and we do different things in terms of how we treat our water. I would always say treat your water, and I know you would as well. I used a soya squeeze, which I loved. It worked out really well for me, and apparently it works. But what do you use, and what are the other ways of treating water that you know of?
Mm-hmm. I love a soya squeeze. That's what I use myself.
All right.
It's very effective. It's easy, and you don't have to waste any fuel with treating your water. The Wilderness Medical Society guidelines recommend 4 different ways of treating water. Heat, which is boiling, and that kills everything. You only need to boil your water for 1 full minute. It should come to a rolling boil, and you boil it for 1 full minute. That will get rid of bacteria, viruses, giardia, cryptosporidium. If you are above 6,500 foot elevation, I don't know, do we have something above that on the AT?
About 20 feet above it, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So if you're 6,500 feet above elevation, you want to boil your water for 3 minutes. And the reason is that at higher elevation, water boils at a lower temperature. So we have all been taught that that water boils at a temperature of 212 degrees Fahrenheit, but that's at sea level. And as you get higher up in the elevation, there's less atmospheric pressure, so water boils at a lower actual thermal temperature.
Didn't know that.
Filtration kills pretty much everything. The ultrafiltration and reverse osmosis also kill the viruses. Halogen treatment. Halogen treatment is the iodine tablets or the chlorine tablets.
That always looked terrible, but quite a few people used it and swore by it.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good for bacteria, but if you're trying to eliminate viruses or protozoan cysts or cryptosporidium cysts, you need a higher concentration of the iodine or chlorine tablets. And actually, cryptosporidium cysts are actually resistant to field treatment with the halogens. In other words, the amount that you would take into the backcountry with you is not going to get rid of the cryptosporidium.
Okay.
And then the last way of filtering water is with ultraviolet light. There's that UV light pen that I think people have been using.
SteriPen. Is it SteriPen?
A SteriPen, yes. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
Yep. Very effective, but it does need to be used in water that is clear. So if you have a lot of particles in the water, you have to filter the particles out of the water first, because the UV light has to actually directly hit the bacteria or the virus in order to kill it. So if there's a lot of cloudiness in the water, you may not get the UV particles hitting the bacteria or the virus. It does not make the water taste any better. So you might have potable water, but it tastes terrible.
Well, you know,
and one thing I thought,
I don't think you care about that when you're out there. I don't look for. Although I did love the taste of mountain spring water, it was great, and I would still always filter it and so on. But frankly, at some stage you need the water, don't you? So it kind of doesn't really matter what the taste is.
Absolutely. But some people might say, "Oh, this water tastes terrible. It might not be safe to drink."
All right.
It's okay to drink. It just tastes terrible.
And you've put in here that in a real pitch you can use a clear plastic water bottle.
Yes, I thought this was actually kind of interesting. The Wilderness Medical Society said if you take one of those plain water bottles, like a smart water bottle or a regular one, take the label off, and you fill it with water and lay it on its side, but preferably on a dark surface. The UV light will actually hit the water, and in 4 hours, it will take 4 hours, but in 4 hours, you will have potable water.
My guess is there's no one out there doing that right now.
No, but this may come in handy if, God forbid, somebody's out there lost and they're able to get water and they're waiting for rescue. This might help them. Yeah.
And you mentioned the Wilderness Medical Society. Do they? And it's not their job, I presume, to recommend businesses, but it's probably their job to recommend the optimal way to do this. Is there something they go down on heavily, say this is the best way to do it, or they just give all those options?
They recommend heat, the boiling, because it does kill everything.
Right.
But they also say that the filtration, the halogen, and the ultraviolet light are definitely very, very good options. And it depends on what you have available.
Okay. Well, look, I've often said how important water is. So, and I know people know it intuitively that water is important, but it's useful for people to at least understand why it's important. And, I think you've covered that today. So next week, what are we talking about next week? Is it nutrition?
Yeah, let's do nutrition.
So you got to work out the nutritional value of 6 Snickers a day.
Of Snickers bars.
Exactly.
I love my Snickers bars.
Exactly.
and Pop-Tarts. We'll talk about Pop-Tarts too.
All right then. Thanks for coming on again. Take it easy.
Great to be here. All
Cheers.
right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Yep, water is the real deal. And possibly one of my biggest eye-openers when I was out there on the AT. It often took me by surprise when it first hit me. I thought I'd been glugging all day long, but I clearly often hadn't. So pay attention to that. As I mentioned earlier, you can catch up with all of Lynn's notes on each subject that she's covered by clicking on a link in our show notes. Now, Lynn hadn't actually quite finished. She reminded me that I'd send a listener's question to her, so we jumped back into the recording session. And when we hang up, as often happens, not in Lynn's case, but in other people's cases, Lynn said, there's something else I meant to mention, so there you go.
Yep. So somebody had asked a question about a Lyme disease vaccine.
Absolutely,
and
you're right.
So I took a look at what was going on. There is a Lyme disease vaccine that is in the stage 3 clinical trials. It's made by Pfizer, who's made one of the COVID vaccines.
Sure.
And
which means half the country won't take it then. But okay.
Yeah. So the phase 2 trial showing promising results. They've started a phase 3 trial that have enrolled about 6,000 participants in about 50 sites where Lyme disease is prominent. They've done it in the U.S., Finland, Germany, Netherlands, Poland, and Sweden. So,
is it a preemptive vaccine? Is it preemptive vaccine then, or is it something that you use once you've got it?
No, this is a prevention. Yes, this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to get this as a preventive vaccine. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Now it's not sure whether we're not.
They can't cure. Sorry. So they can't cure it as such, but they can stop you getting it. Is that that's what the plan anyway?
That's the plan for this particular vaccine. Yes. There are other vaccines that are also in the works, and they're in trials as well. But there's nothing out there just yet that is mainstream. Okay.
I suspect Europe will probably be advanced of us in terms of approving it because the FDA FDA or CDC, one of them is quite slow in approving things. Must be the CDC, but the Europeans tend to try these drugs out more readily, don't they?
Yeah, no, it's the FDA that does the approval of the the vaccines.
All right, yeah. Okay, all right. Is there a timeline on that?
No, not at this point.
Okay, all right. Well, you never know. It's something that certainly is needed because more and more people seem to be getting it. So
right.
It's important.
And we'll do a session on Lyme disease prevention and treatment in the future as well.
Cool. All right. Glad you came back on.
Okay.
Bye. Well, that would be something, wouldn't it? A cure for Lyme. I mean, I'm sure it's a while off, but we'll have one someday, so that's a good thing. Thanks this week goes, as ever, to our amazing supporters who keep this show going. This week, I'm thanking our monthly donors, Justin Mullins, Kevin Eastman, Ann Dobson and Mike DiCello, while Ninka De Haas also gave us a generous donation. Thanks to all of you, and remember you can support us too by going to hikingradionetwork.com and clicking on one of the many donate buttons that you're going to find there. Thank you so much. And by the way, a quick shout out to Julie Gayhart, or Jester. Julie is back with her own podcast on the network, Jester Section Hiker, which is now scheduled to be released every other week on a Saturday. Now, she's not slacking, let me tell you. She and her buddy, Austin Dufresne, have started their own media production company, Alternate Route Media, and they are doing live videotaped podcasts. This morning, I watched a rerun of their interview with Darwin on the trail. It was excellent, so check it out. Finally today, George Stefanos learns the origin of the name Roxylvania. I'll see you next week. Sunday the 17th of July 1983, mile 1098.2. I did the best I could this morning to break the cycle of late nights and late starts in the mornings, hitting the trail at 6:30. As I walked the crest of Rocky Ridge about 40 minutes later, steam was rising thickly from the valleys and the thermometer was already flirting with the 80-degree mark. The AT really played games up there, threading through and over a maze of rock formations on a forested plateau. It probably would have been an interesting walk on a cooler day were I not wearing a heavy backpack, but it was tedious and exhausting today. White Rocks Ridge, about 4 miles later, was a similar stretch of hazardous backpacking. Masses of huge boulders were strewn along the crests, and the trail climbed over many of them. Not long afterwards, the trail began a steep descent across the faces of more gigantic boulders. At the trail's Cumberland Valley crossing, South Mountain and Piney Mountain peter out, and the Blue Ridge is no more. I broke out onto the roadwalk at about 10:30, and the real death march began. Temperatures were now in the 90s, and humidity hung in the air so thickly that it resembled smoke. The initial 4 or 5 miles were the toughest portion of the valley crossing for me, coming at the end of a 12-mile stretch of uninterrupted walking. The water in my canteen was blood warm. Just as soon as I would swallow a gulp of it, my stomach would give me the finger and try to send it right back. In a haze of heat and fatigue, I managed to walk those first 4.5 miles of roads in less than 2 hours. I wanted to collapse on the ground and just lay there, but I told myself to keep plugging away, and soon I would be sitting in the shade of the ice cream lady's porch with a glass of cold water. The ice cream lady is a trail institution. Her family owns a house in Churchtown, Pennsylvania, right on the road which the Appalachian Trail follows through town. Hikers call her the ice cream lady because she encourages them to rest on a shaded back porch while she feeds them ice cream and lemonade. All she asks in return is that they chat with her about their adventures and sign her register. One of the 3 southbound hikers I met at Three Springs Shelter in Northern Virginia on July 9th gave me one of the cards she hands out to hikers who stop by. It said, "Thank you for stopping and sharing your adventure on the Appalachian Trail with us, the Shipe family." I passed through downtown Churchtown, a church, a school and a cluster of houses, and I continued north. Then I saw the sign on a lawn next to the driveway. Shipe's Watering Hole, AT Hikers Welcome. Almost before I knew it, I was sitting in the shade with an ice cream cone in one hand and a glass filled with juice and ice cubes in the other. I had a nice conversation with Bonnie Shipe and her son. She told me that the temperature was once again above 100 and that she had not expected to see any backpackers today. She said that they usually lay over somewhere for a few days when the weather gets this hot. What can I say? I'm the lean, mean mileage machine. I sat on the porch with Mrs. Shipe for more than an hour. I hated to hit that shadeless road again, but it was past 1:30 and I still had 11 miles to go by nightfall. Before I left, she gave me a goal to strive towards over the next 4.5 miles. She told me that the restaurant and the truck stop on US 11 near the interstate, which was closed when my philosopher's guide came out, had reopened. How can I describe the Cumberland Valley Roadwalk this afternoon? The AT passed through a flat country of old farm fields and newer subdivisions. There were virtually no shade trees along the route. The humidity was like death. The tar was semi-liquid on the roads, grabbing at the soles of my boots and releasing them only reluctantly as I trudged along. The whole valley around me was twitching spasmodically on the shimmering heat waves. Each object's dance of death was slightly different from the others, dependent upon its distance from me and the composition of the ground between us. It was one tremendous glaring LSD nightmare. The thick, stagnant haze seemed to magnify rather than block the glare. One vast sun appeared to be beating down from every point of the white dome of the sky. The thought of a large, cold Coke with beads of condensation running down the sides of the glass waiting for me at the truck stop pulled me through this hell. I walked that next 4.5 miles in 1 hour and 15 minutes, even impressing myself. The restaurant was heavily air-conditioned. That was a help, because the heat has been playing havoc with my appetite. I'm now down to 175, 50 pounds lighter than when I began this hike 10 weeks ago, and 20 pounds less than my ideal weight of 195. All these miles I've been hiking lately are beginning to take their toll on my undernourished body. Most of this time, I've been carrying plenty of food in my backpack, but I seldom seem to feel like eating very much. I made up for some of this at the restaurant. I had a 12-ounce steak, 2 baked potatoes, a salad, and 2 large Cokes. In the almost frosty air of that establishment, my appetite returned, and I wolfed that meal down. Then I hung out, sipping my second Coke for more than an hour. The lovely waitresses were very nice. I always expect to be treated like a pariah when I walk into places like this, all dirty and sweaty from the trail, but I never am. Eventually, I had to return to the furnace and complete the road walk. The cold water with which I filled my canteen before I left the restaurant was hot 20 minutes later. 2 miles along, as I was crossing the bridge over Katahdin Creek, a car pulled up and a lady called out to me. She had been in a kitchen fixing dinner and happened to glance out of a window as I trudged by, dripping sweat. She told me that I looked miserable. I did not feel miserable. I was cruising along on autopilot and my mind was firmly switched to the off position. But I can understand how I looked miserable. She filled a plastic container with iced tea and another with ice cubes, jumped into a car and came after me just to bring me these gifts. What can I say? Saying that this was a nice thing to do will be like saying that it was a little warm out today. This thoughtful act helped me to make it through the rest of the day's ordeal. The kindness of the Cumberland Valley people is legendary in thru-hiker circles. Everybody has 1 or 2 stories like this to tell. There was a little more paved road walk. Then the Appalachian Trail followed a steep jeep road up to the crest of Blue Mountain. I arrived at Darlington Shelter, my home for tonight, at about 7 o'clock. Tonight, for the first time since Virginia, I have a shelter all to myself once again. I enjoy most of the company at these shelters, but I also like these nights of solitude. They allow me time to reflect. I have a short 11.5 mile day into Duncannon tomorrow. The hard work is over for this stretch of trail. In Harper's Ferry, I figured on 6.5 days to hike the 122 miles to Duncannon. I could not factor all this unforeseen heat and humidity into that plan. Nevertheless, I stayed on my schedule and stuck to the plan. Tomorrow I get my reward. Restaurants, grocery stores, a laundry, and a real bed. My hike since Waynesboro, Virginia, has been a nice change of pace from the constant physical and emotional crises of the first 830 miles of trail. It has not been all a picnic, but the fact that I have not needed to write words like, "My entire quest now hangs by a thread," for a while, has been somewhat of a relief. My biggest physical problem lately has been the sweltering heat and humidity. The closest I've come to an emotional crisis is a touch of loneliness. I miss my family and my friends. That will be taken care of in a few weeks. Connecticut is about 380 miles away. Monday the 18th of July, mile 1109.7, Duncannon. Yesterday's heat and humidity brewed up a monster thunderstorm last night, which thankfully struck while I was in the shelter, warm and dry. Lightning blazed across the sky, thunder rocked the mountaintop, and cold rain pounded down in buckets. It didn't cool things off any. Today was another steamy day in the middle of hundreds, but at least last night's moisture helped keep the dust down as I walked. I've been choking in my own dust cloud for days. Now I know how Pigpen feels. According to the Philosopher's Guide, the dreaded rocks of Pennsylvania are first encountered in force when you reach Blue Mountain, but I found no remarkable concentrations of them along the first 4 miles of trail this morning. The Appalachian Trail descended off Blue Mountain, climbed over a ridge of its foothills known as Little Mountain, and followed a dirt road for a half mile into a narrow valley sandwiched between the long parallel ridges of Blue Mountain and Cove Mountain. It crossed Pennsylvania 850, a small country highway, and followed gravel and woods roads for about a mile through thick forests. The climb up Cove Mountain to the ridgeline was short, but sadistically steep. The AT climbed 500 feet in 3/10 of a mile on a sick, rocky footpath. Along the 4-mile crest of Cove Mountain, I finally met the famous rocks. They were slippery, shifting piles of loose rocks along much of the trail. In many spots, sharp, razor-backed rocks projected lengthwise from out of the ground like the dorsal fins of submerged land sharks. Candygram, ma'am? Walking was tricky, but I struggled to maintain a decent pace even as those rocks did a number on my feet. The soles became bruised, my ankles sore and swollen, and I definitely managed to stub my toes with excruciating force several times. I didn't even care. I just wanted to get to Duncannon. Just prior to my final descent from Cove Mountain, I found a great viewpoint over the Susquehanna River Valley at Hawk Rock. It was, of course, hazy and humid again, but I could still see for miles up and down the river. Across the valley, I could see the long grey ridge of Peters Mountain, over which I will be hiking tomorrow when I leave Duncannon. I spent 15 minutes enjoying the view. It was my first rest break after 9.5 miles of rocks. There was a bit of very arduous descent, after which the trail crossed a 1/4 mile of rock slides. The smaller rocks kept trying to roll around beneath my feet, but I managed to roll with them and stay on my feet. The trail then continued its descent along an old mine road, which was rather easy walking. A terrible relocation, scaled back up the hill for a 1/2 mile, scrambling across piles of loose rocks and descended again, both very steeply. This eliminated a short walk on a gravel road, but came out on the paved Pennsylvania 274 somewhat further away from town than the old trail had. Thus, it actually added more road walk. Unless there was some new development along the gravel road or a section of trail was closed by a landowner, the relocation made absolutely no sense. The trail followed paved roads directly into downtown Duncannon. I hit the post office to pick up my mail and supply package and walked over to the Doyle Hotel to get a room for the night. It was a dark, quaint old place out of a Raymond Chandler or Dashiell Hammett novel. All the rooms on my floor share a bathroom down the hall. There was no shower, but a nice long bath in lukewarm water revived me enough to go take care of my laundry. The laundromat was a complete rip-off. The dollar changer was set to give back only 95 cents in change for each dollar, and the washers charged 85 cents a load. It was strange to find a joint like that in a friendly town like Duncannon, but my next stop helped me to get over it. I found a pizza place run by genuine fellow Italians, I'm half Italian, where I enjoyed the best pizza I've encountered since I left Connecticut. A couple of other backpackers invited me to join them. They were each hiking the entire Appalachian Trail in smaller segments over a period of several years, and were laying over in Duncannon for a few days waiting for the heatwave to break. One of the men was a large, jovial Texan who had begun this portion of his hike travelling north from Damascus, Virginia, a few days after I left Springer Mountain in Georgia. He had just returned from a guided tour of the nearby Gettysburg battlefield site. He had me laughing with a vivid description of how he had spent the whole tour rooting against all logic and hoping for a Confederate victory. I have about 144 miles remaining in Pennsylvania, and I'm told that the rocks just keep becoming worse right up until the end. I would like to hike only a half day tomorrow, but still arrive in Delaware Water Gap, Pennsylvania, my next supply town, in 7 days. That will put me just across the Delaware River from New Jersey. Connecticut is so close now I can taste it. I can spend a few days at home and enjoy a small fragment of a normal summer with my friends. 310 miles to go. After that, my focus will return to Katahdin and that haunting vision of a great granite peak at the end of a long, hard road. 1,028.8 miles to go.